2 years from today, the world is going to look a lot different in the way we shop, the way consumers browse, the way the consumers discover, the way they transact, the way they express their behavior. Websites are not going away, but their use and purpose is going to dramatically evolve.
Welcome to the DTC Insider Podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisentul.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider Podcast. I'm super happy to record this episode because I'm here for the third time with Mr. Senior Vice President of Postpilot currently, Neal Goyal. Hey, Neal.
Hey.
It's a pleasure to have you again on the show.
Hey, Brian, so great to be back. I've watched your show probably since your first or second episode, and now having appeared a couple of times, like just watching your journey. Excited to be here. I've been amazed to see the progress over the years from you. Love your journey, and it's just an honor to be here.
Yeah, likewise, man. I follow you everywhere you go, and I love interviewing you over and over because I learned so much from you, and I feel that everyone following you on LinkedIn and everywhere else learns a lot. So let's do it, shall we?
All right.
Okay, so during the last two episodes, we discussed something I loved about the way you said it the last few times. It's the evolution of e-commerce throughout the years, right? Now we have one more year to add. But as a quick recap, could you please remind people, because unless you don't remember, right? But I still remember to this day, like the breakdown you did year by year from the money-making machine years of Meta back in 2018 up until the last time we talked. So would you mind doing that quick recap if you want, and then adding 2025 as a full year now into the mix?
Yeah, totally. When you rewind the clock and look at everything that's happened really since the birth of Shopify, right? But to say e-com has been in a roller coaster would be a dramatic understatement, right? Incredible innovation, incredible growth. At the same time, it's been in an environment where the floor seems to be shifting every 3 to 4 months for the brands. And as much growth as the space has seen, it has come with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so when you think about it, you rewind the clock and it's like, okay, Shopify is doing its thing. Brands are launching, finding that it's easier to launch their sites at a fraction of the cost of time it traditionally would take. Like that was that first leg of growth for Shopify, and really hit this kind of climactic point 2019, 2020 when COVID hit, right? Where you saw by that point Shopify had about 1.5 million stores. And then COVID hit, everyone became an entrepreneur, everyone quit their jobs, everyone went remote, picked up a side hustle. And all of a sudden, next you know, Shopify has 4 million stores in what felt like the almost blink of an eye. Now, until then, Facebook had just rolled out a few years prior. Ads were cheap. There was no restriction on privacy. The amount of data that Facebook was giving you, it was just a largely unregulated environment. And as a result, ads were really cheap. Brands were able to really target quite beautifully, get the right customers into the funnel. You could almost take this dollar bill, turn it into a paper airplane, throw it into the universe, and it comes back as $5 or $10. And it was that combined with the demand to start your own brand that created this huge boom cycle, right, over the course of 2021. Now, obviously, we saw a lot of that change when the reopenings of 2021 started taking place post-COVID. You saw a lot of individuals go back to work. Those side hustles are kind of put to the side. But now we're entering this other cycle where you're seeing, okay, there is a little bit more of a shifting or declining demand from e-com, but what didn't change was a permanent shift in consumer behavior, right? It really, that period, even though the demand days of e-com will likely go unmatched compared to that moment, it did completely shift in how people shop online and change behavior and where they go to first discover products and where they go to ultimately transact on products. Amazon became bigger as a result. D2C became bigger as a result. So now you go, okay, everything seems like the coast is clear. And then that moment, iOS 14, late 2021 hit and completely just shook the ground. All of a sudden, privacy changes took place. We had brands not being able to retarget. Brands are forced to cast a wider net on an audience on Facebook, spending more, seeing conversions take a dip in that process, largely because they don't have access to the same data that they had before to get the right customer into the funnel. And so everyone's really panicking, right? Panicking like, wow, like conversions are down, we're spending more money. That was the first chapter of Rising CAC, right? Where customer acquisition cost spiked up. Everyone's at a knee jerk trying to figure out what's going on. But what they didn't realize is that is forever the new normal, right? So then came this kind of like period of like, okay, wow, we didn't know an algorithm could really do this to us. We didn't know that that this could actually happen. We had kind of gone into this mindset of getting programmed for click and conversion, printing money, and really like lack of necessity to invest in brand, to invest in larger, broader brand plays, and instead we're focused on that click and conversion, which ultimately brands realize, wow, we need to go into own channels, right? We need to invest in email. And that's where you saw during that time, Klaviyo, boom, absolutely took off with that whole motion. So if you look at the chart of iOS 14 and everything that happened and the path of Klaviyo's growth, it was literally perfect overlap there, right? Email, SMS, my time previously at TapCard, mobile apps, like all of those retention owned channels are the ones that went into this absolute boom cycle as a result, right? So 2021, 22, right? That was a very dominant theme. The challenge, though, is by 2023, customer acquisition costs never really had slowed down, right? Meta continued to get harder. Algorithm changes continue to take place. Customer acquisition costs continue to skyrocket, minimum 20% year over year, every year. Lack of predictability. We had presidential cycles come into the mix, taking it even higher. And so what you have here is a situation where brands aren't really profitable on that first sale. Okay, maybe there's some brands that are the exception to that, but for the most part, brands are betting on LTV, that customer coming back a second, third time to ultimately become profitable with them because customer acquisition costs are so high, right? So now that's kind of what we covered in our last chat, like kind of like the storyline there. But then now the question is what all happened in 2025, and what was the dominant theme there? You would think it'd be dramatically different with all that has happened with AI, but for ecom, it really didn't, right? For ecom on the brand side, software, oh my gosh, I have such spicy takes to share there. But on the brand side, AI didn't really change anything like we thought it would. What ultimately happened, customer acquisition costs continue to go up. Retention, prioritization on retention continue to increase in importance. And now in 2026, we're actually truly entering this kind of agentic world, something that's still being defined that we don't know yet. But that's where we are.
Breakdown. Once again, it's a pleasure to listening to you because it gives brands context. Because every brand, when especially this time of the year, when they plan their next moves for the year, they look back, and you cannot look back without context, right? And that gives them context to think about the good old days and the tough days as well. Money wasn't cheap. There was inflation, socioeconomic context, really tough. And last year, when or at least I thought that it was going to be the turn, the inflection point, tariffs hit, and it was another tough moment for brands. So, would you agree, based on everything that you discussed with brands, that last year could be defined as, let's say, uncertain? Or how could you define last year for ecom brands in general, in a word?
Yeah. I think the ground shifting So uncertainty, absolutely, right? But like, I think that's a function of like, it felt like the rules were changing every 60 days. The environment was changing every 60 days. All these other like what I would call black swan events, rare events that typically wouldn't happen and have such a foothold took place. We had tariffs that completely hit. You know, the crazy part is tariffs hit, customer acquisition costs continue to get higher. Brands had to react to it in just survival mode. So they just started cutting, cutting, cutting. And there was a dichotomy or a tale of two stories of brands that cut so far that they almost reached a point of like no return. They're kind of in they went into almost like a zombie state because obviously they had to keep afloat with the tariff impact. They had to do what they had to do, but that meant cutting marketing spend, top of funnel spend, retention investment, other tools and tech that were going to help them drive more into the funnel. It prevented them from having the appetite of risk of testing new acquisition channels because we don't want to test. We don't want experiments. We need something that's certain. And so like with all of those things, like it was like a pretty traumatic moment that a lot of brands still haven't come back from. On the flip side, there's also a cohort of brands that were well capitalized and that prioritized in brand building from day number one. One example of that is Grunes. Grunes is a classic example of a brand that was built not in the go-go days of D2C, right? It, you know, when you think of a brand that was started in 2016, 2017, and they grew to 100 million plus and were able to survive it, yeah, they were able to survive a lot of this because of how well capitalized they had become during a very easy era, a money printing era. So timing was on their side. But what about brands that were built after that? And Grüns is a classic example of that, right? One of the largest supplement spans brands in existence, born just a few years ago, on track to do north of, let's call it $500 million this year in sales. And where did that come from? Did that just come from because they started spraying money on Meta? No, they had a fantastic product. They invested heavily in brand. They prioritized their messaging with their customers. They have a fierce community. They invested in that from day one. And those are the things that when those fluctuations take place, those are the things that continue to help you ride it out. Whereas those that didn't invest in brand, that are only built on direct response and direct response only, as soon as they had to cut budgets, so did any chance of their success as well, right? So there's a different cohort of brands that just invested in brand building from day number one, and they're just benefiting from it as a result, right?
Yeah. I'm asking you these questions because many conversations I have from the, let's say, agency standpoint or here in the podcast, many founders think that some things are happening only to them. And they don't know that there are many brands struggling out there. Not everyone is on LinkedIn or is active on LinkedIn, even reading and consuming other founders' content. So they don't know that what's happening to them is happening for a reason and that is not happening to them only. So I have the understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're not only in touch with brands currently through a Postpilot, but you are in touch with brands as a mentor as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. I'm quite active on both Intro and Mentor Pass. Both of those are mentorship platforms where I advise and consult in the e-commerce space in two primary categories. I help brands just on a consulting basis, not a sales call, but truly like it's amazing the types of conversations that can actually happen in a very unfiltered environment where there is no objective or other than, hey, I need someone to talk to. I need someone to learn from. You talk to a lot of brands all day. What else are you hearing? And what you see on social is like the polar opposite of that. You only see people celebrating their wins, seeing all the successes. You hear these things like scaling. Oh, we're scaling. We're growing. And you feel like you're the only one that's not. You feel like these things are happening to you. You feel like all the things are broken in your house and they're fine in everybody else's house. That is so far from the truth. And so, yeah, during these mentorship sessions, have the opportunity to really get the unfiltered conversations as well. And that is both on the brand side and then the software side that supports e-commerce too, because things are equally challenging on the software ecosystem that's supporting these brands, right? I think oftentimes we forget that as much as brands are in an absolute roller coasters, all the software companies that support them are in that roller coaster with them, right?
You're part of
And
an
yeah,
sorry.
100%, 100%. And possibly even more to an extreme, right? More to an extreme because we're seeing everything on on like a 3-month tail, and oftentimes you lose a customer just because of something that might be totally out of your control, right? Tariffs hit, 30% of their stack got cut overnight without question, right? And so those are the things that both the software side and the brand side are dealing with, and in kind of this new normal. And particularly on the software side, AI just is going to change a whole lot there, and we're only in the first inning of seeing that.
We're going there because there's a lot I would like to talk about. Of course, SaaS, Postpilot, AI. One more thing about this. I was going to this mentorship conversation because I wanted to ask you about the from the latest conversations that you had, of course, without any names. What are they struggling with? Mainly, let's say, brand founders. And what next steps are they considering? Or finally, what next steps do you think that brands should consider moving forward in 2026, like channel diversification, as you said before, working more on the brand, and what does that mean, working more on the brand side, etc.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. There's, I'd say, a couple parts to that answer. First, when you think about, you mentioned channel diversification, it's no secret that I am like a big proponent of that, right? Like, it's diversify at all costs, because at the end of the day, if you look at 2025, the amount of changes that took place with Meta were absolutely insane, and performance was really unpredictable all year. So the question is, if the floor is shifting that much in a channel that you're so reliant on, why aren't you making those bets? You took the patience to bet on Meta and test and iterate and trip and fall through trial and error. That is the process in experimenting with any other acquisition channel as well. And for those that, I mean, I spend most of my time with brands doing over 50 million in GMV. I'd say about 95% of my time is spent with brands doing over 50 million GMV. And they get divided into compartments. One that actually is prioritizing channel diversification. And what are you seeing there? You're seeing their expectations are largely managed. They're not expecting 3 times the performance than what Meta is giving them. They're actually expecting Meta-like performance. Just give me a second channel to be able to diversify across, because it's a method of de-risking. It's brands who survived 2024 and 2025 that were able to de-risk their business in some form or fashion, right? This is also why AppLovin absolutely took off. The demand for AppLovin for the most of the first year was focused on um, uh, uh, allowing brands to advertise, but the brands had to be spending $25,000 a day on Meta in order to even qualify, right? That's part of a function that AppLovin was trying their new D2C product. They needed to gatekeep and test it out with some of the larger brands that had more freedom of resources and could do more testing. But if you think about it, that's why AppLovin was so successful in that regard, was they were able to prove that there could be an alternate channel to Meta, right? And so ultimately it came down to profitability and predictability and profitability. So what's the challenge that most brands are struggling with, you mentioned? It's the profitability piece, but not just profitability, because when you think of profitability, you think of like, what's happening today? What does my cash flow look like today? No. Can I predict my profitability 6 months from today? And if you're fully reliant on any one single channel, there's no way you could possibly forecast your profitability then either, right?
And as you said in the beginning of the conversation, you you said that brands, of course, started to understand after iOS 14 that they needed to understand something called retention, LTV, profitability. And that takes us to, and took them, of course, to embrace other channels, retention channels, which some are acquisition channels as well, email marketing, could be SMS, apps, and of course, direct mail, right? And I know that you preach this and we share this thought, that, is not only growth at all costs, it's not only speaking about customer acquisition and we all need that, but it's also how can we make more money on the back end to be able to afford the increasing costs on the front end as well. So I wanted to ask you, because I know that with everything that you preach, why did you make the shift to Postpilot? It's a question that I have for you, given that I don't know, I know you for, I don't know, a few years now, and it's the first time I speak with you directly since you made the shift.
Wonderful question. As I was looking at the next step in the career, first off, I know I was going to be in e-commerce for the rest of my life. Like until you take me out to the backyard, put a bullet in the back of my brain, I'll be in e-commerce, right? Like until you tell me not to be, right? And so then when you think of that and being in the software space, it's been a pretty intense few years for the software that's supporting brands. Just like I mentioned earlier, brands have undergone a ground shifting environment, roller coaster environment over the past several years. Well, guess what? All the software vendors and providers supporting them have gone through the same. So when I was like, it was about 6 months ago, I was kind of like looking 6, 7 months ago, I started developing what I viewed as like a therapy moment or Neal needs therapy moment. And what I mean by that is I have, if you know me in person, if you know me on LinkedIn, if you know me in a conversation with my team, if you know me in any regard, you know I'm a pretty high energy individual. Everything is pretty rosy. I put on the rose-colored glasses quite intentionally. I'm very optimistic. Glasses always half full of energy, over-caffeinated, and really love seeing everybody around me win. That is literally me through and through in every possible channel you'll ever see me in, publicly, privately. And that is representative of how I feel about e-commerce, right? That's because I love supporting the e-commerce brand. I feel like I see myself in them in terms of how they've all built their brands on their backs, blood, sweat, and tears in everything they do. So I'm bullish on e-com. That's no secret. However, about 7 months ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, I started developing a different view of the software that's supporting the ecosystem. And that view was extremely dark, extremely dark. So when I say therapy moment, on one hand, brand side, I'm so incredibly bullish. But when it came to the software, very bearish, very dark. And those are two very colliding themes for me. Now, why this dark view of the software that supports the ecosystem? It kind of happened in 3 different chapters. There was the chapter of, let's call it, like we saw this, with the boom of, let's say, 4 million stores that popped up on Shopify during COVID. Well, guess what? Thousands of software companies also were born virtually overnight as well, right? So then you get to a point where by 2021, early 2022, you now had 14,483 software companies that were all chasing the same 2,000-3,000 brands on Shopify. In other words, you had multiple entrants coming into the space to support them and a very little and narrow total addressable market. So what it became is slightly a race to the bottom on price. New competitor comes in, offers a comparable solution just for less, just for less, just for less. It's like this race to the bottom. Now, what I'm saying here is nothing really new because that's the environment we lived in 21, 22, and we dealt with it, right? We adapted to it. But that was just chapter 1. Chapter 2 became about AI producing software. So this is still pre-ChatGPT. ChatGPT still wasn't a thing at the consumer level. But AI very much was in building software from the ground up. And so then all of a sudden you see this new cohort of software emergence that basically built equivalent solutions to the legacy providers in a fraction of the time, in like 4 months. These legacy providers that we all know in e-com, what it took them years and years and years to build, equivalents or even better alternatives were being built in 3 and 4 months because they were being built AI first, AI native, built with AI from the ground up. They didn't need a smart engineer. They had AI to be the engineer for them. And these tools are built with like 4 or 5 human beings, right? That's it. Software companies going up against software companies that had 300-400 employees. And these startups were this new chord where they were not funded by venture capital. They didn't need to sell their product at an extreme premium to support venture capital initiatives. They could sell their solution for a lot less because it cost a lot less to stand it up because of AI. And so AI created this new cohort where, boom, here comes another leg lower for the entire software ecosystem that wasn't AI first, right? In my view, many software companies in the ecosystem are in a lot of trouble, right? And so because of that, because ultimately it's a limited total addressable market and a race to the bottom on price. And new and better competitors are popping up every single day because of AI, right? That was just chapter 2. Chapter 3 is now where things got dark for me, where it was like, what does agentic mean? What does agentic commerce mean? Right now, it's kind of a buzzword. We know Shopify is investing heavily in it without a question. But what does agentic really mean? We are coming up with ideas, but we haven't really seen it manifest yet. The only thing we know, though, is that 2 years from today, the world is going to look a lot different in the way we shop, the way consumers browse, the way the consumers discover, the way they transact, the way they express their behavior. Just like COVID completely permanently changed the behavior of consumers when it came to shopping online, we are going through another consumer shift that's taking place right now that we're only at the beginning of, and we have no idea what it's going to look like. In other words, when you think of agentic, every customer at some point, this could be 6 months from now, this could be 12 months from now, this could be 18 months from now, but every customer is going to be able to have their own customer journeys depending on how they prefer to shop, what their preferences are, and a customized experience based on their behavior. Whereas right now we say, hey, Brian, you like that product? You must go to www.com, go browse that product, add it to product page, go through checkout. We force every single customer down that same funnel right now, right? Whereas agentic
At
is
the end of the day,
opening it all up, right? And so when you think
yeah,
about it, the brand's website is no longer as valuable to the brand going forward. Like the website ultimately becomes like a showroom. And so if you think of it as a showroom, like what if people are buying in chat? What if people are buying in other platforms? What if we have this OpenAI necklace that's just living around our neck and listening to our every want and dream and buying things on our behalf? Well, then what is the purpose of the website? The value of the website goes down, which means all the software that supports that website also gets devalued in that process, right? So this is the crazy part where I'm like, okay, where do I go, right? So ultimately, it goes into 1 to 2 buckets. If you're looking to shift your career and really trying to bet on the future of where a company's going to be, some people are looking for a job and they say, hey, I'm looking for a job for the next year. Great. More power to them. That's not me though. I need to join a company that I believe in, that I'm going to believe in 3 to 5 years from now, right? And that they have a genuine path to success and an exit. And so then I'm thinking like, who are those players? If it's a race to the bottom in software, who are those players? So it only comes into 2 buckets. Either A, you are going to be AI, driving the AI and agentic conversation, and you are at the forefront of it. Well, guess what? We don't have any of those players determined yet. Shopify's the only one investing heavily, but we don't have any of these startups that are actually like gaining the traction to say that's going to be the winner, or that one's got early promise. We're too early there yet, right? But if you do pick the right one, wow, you like amazing. But that's a moonshot. The other bucket is let AI do its thing, and it will, as a category, be fine and continue to be successful. An example of that is logistics. You still have to ship the box to your consumer's doorstep. Let AI do its thing. Logistics will only get better with AI, right? Or think of Postpilot. we are still always going to have a mailbox. The Internal Revenue Service still has to have a place to send their notices, right? So like we will always have a mailbox. And so when you think about it, there is a defensibility in AI. AI can come and make direct mail better, but the means, the mechanism, there is no algorithm. There is nobody else's rules at play. There's no platform. There's no regulation around it. There's no AI that's going to come and take it away. And so that's where it's like, okay, that's a defensible category. And so then when you look at the defensible categories, geez, logistics, no way. I'm a MarTech guy. Like, sorry, I can't sell logistics all day long. However, when it came to Postpilot, it's like, what? Let's look at Meta. What's a brand willing to spend on Meta if it's performing? There's no limit. There's literally no limit. If it's performing, what's a brand willing to spend on AppLovin if it's performing? That can go up forever, right? And that's why I was so excited about Postpilot. Is Postpilot has not just a retention engine, but an acquisition engine to do what Meta for Mail. We are doing Meta for Mail. Truly programmatic, AI-driven, cold prospecting, building lookalike audiences, and targeting net new customers through acquisition, right? So as we continue to develop Meta for Mail, what's the potential if it performs well over time? There's literally no limit. And that's what got me so excited about the app.
Brands that haven't explored direct mail yet, what do they need to know that they don't currently know?
Yeah. You know, when you think about direct mail as a category, it's like direct mail has been around since the beginning of time, right? Like digital's new relative to direct mail, right? But direct mail's been around for hundreds of years, right? So when you think of it, direct mail, you think of it in its most traditional sense. Like you have a print shop, you send out some mailers, send out some catalogs and whatnot. So you're predisposed to think about it in a traditional sense, and it does okay, right? It does okay. It's always done okay. That's why the industry has continued to survive. There was this time though when then, 2016, 17, 18, 19 hit and the rise of everything digital where it fell out of favor, right? It fell out of favor largely because of Meta, where Meta taught us click conversion, click conversion. Then all of a sudden around attribution, like attribution is a much bigger thing in the last 5 years than it ever was before, right? And so now performance marketers of today, they have a different rigor and a different standard for measurement, for testing, for incrementality, for looking for opportunity, for evaluating a channel. It's a completely different rigor. And they couldn't do that with direct mail before because the ability to measure the incrementality, the actual conversion impact just wasn't there. So it fell out of favor because digital's like we're programmed for direct response and therefore direct mail couldn't do that. And that's where Postpilot was born. We have merged the channel that is considered been around since the beginning, but then also merged it with the performance marketer's rigor, where we can track conversions to the card, where we can actually measure in dashboard incrementality, where you can see attribution data live as your customers are receiving cards, and doing so in an autopilot fashion where there are no minimums, there are no budgets, there's no lift. It's just an always on programmatic system that can just be firing on all cylinders every single day on your behalf in the background, right? And so that's where direct mail I think typically fits or direct mail has kind of gone through this cycle where it's really exciting right now, particularly at Postpilot. But then if a brand's never done it before, like where do they start? Where does it potentially fit? Think about email. Email has gotten harder as a channel as every single year has taken hold, right? Email performance has gone down over time, largely driven by Google now so-called own channel as email is no longer now that Google has continued to implement more and more rules over time. Brands are going to spam, put in a promo folder, but then more importantly, it's so saturated. Like you go look and you look at someone's inbox, promotion, promotion, promotion. The email inbox has actually fundamentally been destroyed for the consumer, right? It's viewed as a to-do list for the consumer. It's not viewed as a place of enjoyment or entertainment, right? So the channel has become so incredibly noisy, and it's not just email. It could be SMS. It could be other digital channels too. And so this is where every single brand has a huge batch of their audience that is no longer responding to any of those emails, that's now unsubscribed. Maybe they've bought from the brand before and then unsubscribed and completely disengaged. Well, guess what? What have they done in their CRM? They've suppressed that audience in Klaviyo to save on costs because that audience hasn't engaged. They've gone dead on email. Well, guess what? That's the exact audience we want to go play with. And we want to go fire off a card to them, right? And so we have the ability to reinvigorate that customer. Where we start with our customers is typically on winbacks or lapsed buyers, someone that has bought once in the past or twice in the past, just hasn't bought in over a year. And we print, no pun intended, print money in that strategy.
Stage of growth should a brand consider to start incorporating it into their marketing mix?
There is no bottom line threshold. Quite frankly, it's a channel diversification play. Typically, if there was a situation when you think of traditional direct mail, you need to send out 10,000 cards minimum. Okay, yes, now you need to be of a certain brand size in order to make that investment worthwhile, right? Whereas because you can send literally 5 postcards if you want to, right? But do so in a very personalized fashion too. So Brian, you go to a website, you click on a specific product page, you spend over 30 to 60 seconds on that product page, and then you leave. You don't even add it to cart. You don't give them their email. You don't subscribe to a flow. We have the ability to de-anonymize your physical mailing address, fire off one single card to you based on your on-site behavior that you were looking at this product. Here's an offer to convert. And we can send you a card, one single card that day. So there is no minimum. Everything can be truly programmatic on a per customer level, on a one-to-one level, based on your purchase history, based on your on-site behavior. And that's where it's like, there is no limit on brand size on where they should start, right?
That's great. And what type of, let's say, results, conversion rate, or however you measure it, should brands realistically expect from this channel? Because let's say, again, some brands have never done this. They don't know what to expect. They don't, people are, let's say, they need to see to trust a channel, right? And if they have never trusted that channel, what can they expect realistically?
Yeah, that's a great call. First, performance is often going to vary based on like category, AOV, and other factors, just like it would impact conversion on site. But when you think about where a brand will typically start is in those win-back campaigns or, trying to re-engage lapsed buyers. We're going to see a 3, 4, 5x, 7x ROAS on those campaigns. I mean, these are customers that have heard of you before because they bought from you before. They just haven't bought in a really long time, right? And so those perform extremely well. Now, ROAS on its face is not also the measure that matters most. What matters most is incrementality. Can you demonstrate that this was truly incremental? And so everything on every campaign that you run, we actually measure incrementality by doing a holdout test. In other words, if in a particular segment you have an audience of 20,000 people, we'll actually only send 5,000 people, hold out 15,000, and then be able to measure the direct mail impact of those that received a card versus those that didn't, right? And then we show that incrementality with holdout in dashboard on a per campaign and per creative basis on how that performs. So ultimately, no matter how big or small you are as a brand, incrementality is really the only thing that matters. And if brands are truly trying to reduce or offset customer acquisition costs, the last thing they want to do is throw more money at a channel when they don't know if it's actually driving a greater lift had they not, right? And so that's the other standard, right? Performance marketer standard is measuring incrementality, proving impact, proving lift, and that ultimately will determine where things should go from a test. So from a conversion perspective and performance perspective, very strong on the win-back side. And then we learn what the brand's targets are, target CPAs are, and create a customized acquisition campaign that allows them to achieve their targets or even beat them.
So going back for a minute to AI and the future and the present, but the future mostly. Yeah, of course, we don't know what's going to happen. It's crazy the times we're living. But there's one thing we do know, and I will love your take on this. It's a classic, that TV didn't replace radio, online didn't replace offline. What do you think will happen with websites? Mentioned briefly that, of course we don't know, right? But if you had to guess, please, will you think that it will be only a percentage of people buying through agents, and then most of us will keep buying from websites and websites are not going anywhere? Or do you feel that maybe not in 2026, but in the short term, let's say, that will happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Websites are not going away, right? Long term. They're not going away, but their use and purpose is going to dramatically evolve, right? When it comes to the end consumer. And so if we are evolving from a place where right now we're saying every customer has to go down the same journey, go to this website and check out, and that's changing into an agentic world, the value of the website to the brand completely evolves and goes down to a degree. It becomes a showroom of sorts. It becomes a place for brand story. It becomes a place for creative and drawing connection with a very engaged and high intent customer. Consumer shopping behavior is going to be dramatically different. So in my view, the website is not going away like the yellow pages once did. However, it is dramatically going to be a smaller piece of the overall brand strategy. Direct to consumer, I think, as a term, means website, right? Direct to consumer 2 years from today will mean a whole lot something different, and website is one piece of that pie, right? Over the long run, though, it truly is going to become a showroom. I think a few proof points that are going to show you that that's true is obviously the way customers are discovering products in ChatGPT. We haven't even gone down the path of customers actually adopting purchasing there yet, but it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better from here, right? And we have made chat and other LLMs a permanent part of the way we discover everything in our life now, right? So you have to assume that there's going to be more transactions there. Proof point number 2, ChatGPT just launched ads, right? You launch ads in the same place where you can also convert, right? That's a pretty incredible place. Right now, we're seeing ads in Facebook, and yes, we can convert in Facebook. We see ads on Google, and we can convert in Google, but that is completely different in the way we're using ChatGPT. So what is that? If you notice, the word website is not coming anywhere in this mix right now, in this conversation right now. And it's for those brands that for the customers that say, hey, okay, I'm really interested in this product. I discovered it in this unique way. I want to look at it more. I want to learn more. Or I am an existing customer. I've already purchased a few times. I want to find something that draws me closer to this brand, right? That's the purpose of the website as opposed to a place to convert, right? And that's going to forever change. That's going to impact the software ecosystem. That's also going to impact in the way brands have to adapt in what they're doing for their specific website as well. But gone are the days where a brand says, I need to go invest $1 million on a website. Like, I think we've officially, and they're still doing it on Shopify. They're hiring, top tier agencies to build these websites, but the reality is the value of the website is going down over time, right?
One of the last things I want to say is that I recently heard something about agentic commerce that changed my perspective, and I'm sure it's even the beginning, just the beginning. And the commerce is not, someone was saying, I don't remember the name, it is for me. I'm Neal. I have 3 boys, family of 5, right? And I wanted to do the groceries for me for the entire year. I don't want to ever run out of shampoo, whatever. You will already know, your favorite cereals, your boys, and everything. And we'll start shopping for you in a recurrent basis. It will know that you like to buy your groceries on making it up Walmart or Whole Foods or whatever, and it will purchase for you. It will find the best deal, and it will completely forget about that. And I'm sure that's only the beginning of what it will do for us. But it's not just buy this one thing for me. And it was wow. It's really going to change things.
We as brands, we've been stressing for the last several years of like, how do we hold our consumers' attention? Right? How do we hold it? And it's become harder over time, right? In what you're describing here, you actually never got their attention in the first place. Someone is acting on your behalf. The emotional part of the equation gets eradicated, right? And that's pretty wild to think about, right? Truly wild to think about, that consumer behavior is largely driven on emotion. And if you have someone acting on your behalf that acts unemotionally, what does that mean? Wow. Can't even wrap my head around that entire thought process, right? A wild one to think about.
Neal, it's always a pleasure to have you here. I'll keep going for hours, but I know we are on time. Any final prediction, if you have to make one prediction? It could be something that you already said, and you can say that too. For when we meet, hopefully, for the first episode next January, we will check on this and say, was it a reality or not? What would you say?
Now more than ever, with the rise of digital and how noisy everything digital has become, and with this new world of agentic and whatever that's going to mean someday, the concept of having a human personal touch is going to stand out more than it ever has. That in real life moment is going to stand out more than ever. Brands who invest in developing a personal touch with their customer outside of a digital channel through in real life experiences are ultimately going to be able to cut through all of this noise. And it's harder than ever to keep their engagement, to keep a consumer's attention, to keep a consumer's love. But one way that's going to prove to be an extremely effective strategy in doing so is just developing a close human connection with them in some form or fashion.
Thank you again for being on the show. I, again, admire you, follow you. So it was a true pleasure to have you here once again.
Hey, Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure as well. Obviously, I've followed your journey for a really long time, and I love catching up with you. You're a legend, and thanks so much for having me.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.